All right, it shows live. Everyone, welcome to Juju Show number 4. We keep the train trucking along with this episode today, the 18th of January. And I am Rick Harding, your host with Juju Engineering. Let's go around and do some intros. Antonio, welcome back.
Hello, I'm Antonio. I work on the Juju Solutions team, so we work on developing charms and bundles around Kubernetes and big data and OpenStack.
Cool. Brett.
Hi, I'm Brett Dolachek. I head up the Juju engineering team, and I thought I'd come watch my team put on a great demo today.
All right. James, Mr. Beatty.
I'm James Beatty. I'm a DevOps engineer at Creative Drive.
Awesome. And Tim, welcome to join us. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey guys, I'm Tim Van Steenberg, and I work on the Juju ecosystem. Specifically, do a lot of work on tooling around Juju stuff.
I'm here to help show us some awesome stuff today. But first, I want to start going through the community news of the last 2 weeks. And I'm going to start with our regular reminder about the Charmer Summit, because it is bearing down like a freight train. And so this is February 6th and 7th in Ghent, which is outside of Brussels, in blanking. What's the name of the country?
Ghent.
Yeah, but that's the city. What's the name of the country? I'm blanking on. Belgium. That's what it is. Sorry. And so, anyways, this is co-located with the config management camp. So everyone's welcome to come out and join us. We'll have some sessions. You have some hands-on time with the engineers to ask your questions. And we'll have some knowledge share around how we use Juju to save our operational bacon and make things more efficient out there.
Yep. And it's free to attend if you can get there.
Yep. So it'll be quite awesome. Next up, Juju 2.1 Beta 4 went out after the last show, but I guess almost 2 weeks ago. And the big thing we want to kind of call out is, this is kind of I think might be the last beta. So we want to make sure we get good feedback from folks testing things out. And the big things we want to try to get some hands-on with are folks using the model migration feature. This is kind of the ability to take a model from one controller and move it to another controller without affecting all the running applications and everything. So there's been a lot of work for a long while to make this thing solid. And so we want to get people banging on it and feedback on how it is. Have you guys played with this at all yet? No, non-beta crowd yet.
Beta 4 specifically, or you're talking about the snaps on the dailies?
No. I mean, it's in beta 4, but it's been in a few betas. We just want to get folks playing with the beta. Folks tend to be a little bit scary of the early betas. A Juju ate my baby or ate my data, but it's getting very close to an RC. So it's at that point where folks should definitely feel free to try out. I will say the RC is where we'll get upgrades, and I think that's where we'll see the biggest uptake of folks trying it out as we hit RC. But now's a chance to.
We're using beta 4 specifically for the shared controllers and some of our charm CI workflows. So what we'd like to be able to do is have a controller come up and say, hey, in your Juju CI run environment, you'd like to be able to actually test how your things are working on multiple clouds. So you can have a config option on charm to add your actual, add to your controllers and add to your models to that. So that's where we needed the shared controller to be able to have that.
Yeah, cool.
One thing we've been noticing is you got to make sure that you keep the versions of Juju aligned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. The vSphere love that's in here, definitely if you've got some VMware laying around in your corporation, now's a good time to try it out with Juju and see how you can leverage that. And then conjure-up has got some updates that are really good. And I know a lot of us spent some time playing with conjure-up and Kubernetes, which is really turning out to be a very awesome way to get a Kubernetes cluster going in a hurry very easily on a variety of substrates. I know we had folks doing it in LXD locally on GCE, AWS. The lovely thing about this is it's not like a specific tool just to get Kubernetes going on one platform or substrate, but we leverage the awesomeness of Juju to get it going everywhere. All right, so play with the beta, everybody. Next interesting mailing thread that I pulled out, and I think this was you, wasn't it, James, with the reactive bash prompt, where you can output your controller and model info in your prompt.
Super rough, but yeah, I updated it and cleaned it up a little bit.
All right. Yeah, no, I can definitely see where this would be really useful, especially as you go around and you're really flipping around different controllers, different models on things. And I have a challenge to issue because as someone who is a ZSH lover, I think this needs to happen for ZSH as well. So definitely check out James' post. We'll have a link here in the show notes to his sample code. And then I think we need to get this going on ZSH so that the true PowerShell users have access to the same awesomeness. Next up is another thread. This led to something kind of interesting. I want to take a second on this one. And the title of the thread was showing the Juju GUI in the controller model. And it hits upon a few different interesting topics. One in particular was that the question here was, how do I get access to the GUI charm that is serving the GUI that's built into Juju? So whenever I bootstrap, I can modify that charm. And the answer that came back out of that was, you can't. There's no charm. The GUI is actually packaged and served as, the GUI is raw JavaScript, CSS, HTML. All it is, it's a JavaScript client to the Juju API. So what you actually get is just a build of it, a tarball of it that gets untarred, and it's served out from the same API server that the Juju API's calls are all made. And so this is really handy because it just looks like another call to the Juju controller, but it does have the disadvantage of is that all the knobs and buttons you were expecting from the charm aren't there to leverage. So what we actually kind of pulled apart in the thread was the actual goal was to try to see, could you use Let's Encrypt in order to have to stop getting those warnings about invalid certs and things whenever you pulled up a GUI on a controller? And the answer to that is yes. And what we are working to update in the documentation is there's actually a Juju config for the controller called autocert-dns-name. And this means that you can, when you bootstrap, or even after you bootstrap, can you change it after the fact? I don't know that you can. You might have to bootstrap with it. You can tell it what the DNS name of this controller should be. So what I want to do is kind of just show what I've got going on here. So, because I actually wanted to play with this because I hadn't tried this out yet. So let me screen share my terminal here. All right. So can you guys see my terminal okay here?
Yep.
I've got two controllers here. And the one is the Google US East one. And if I show, what you can actually see here is, where's that config option? Oh, no, sorry. It's Juju control. So here, this autocert-dns-name. I actually created a DNS entry in a domain that I own, rick.jujugui.org. And I pointed it at the IP address for this controller. So what's interesting is I can Juju GUI from here. And notice it has an external IP address, and that's great. What I did to test this out and to cheat, so I took that IP address and I went and put it in the DNS as an A record. If you look at my controllers, I copied cache file, my controllers.yaml file, and I copied it and edited it. And what I'm going to do is switch over to this one. If I could type. What's interesting on this one is if I go in and show the controller, I did a little hand editing of this, so this works without this, right? This is just me trying to demonstrate this. I took out the external DNS, the IP address for the entry, and just put in the DNS entry. And this all works. So if I run Juju GUI, notice now there's a little bit of my terminal fussing about stuff, but notice that the entry to my GUI is rick.jujugui.org. And it opens that. And so if I switch my share here to my browser, you'll see here that I've got rick.jujugui up. It shows as secure. I can look at the details of the certificate and see that it is authenticated with the Let's Encrypt certificate. So basically by adding one entry to my Bootstrap config, I can share out now this GUI URL, and it shows up as a secure encrypted site. So it's kind of interesting. The CLI will work when you change that to a DNS name. I think there's some future things we can do to help basically allow you to make this kind of more official and more easy to use for things, right? Because what you really want is you want to allow folks to register to the controller with the DNS name and have things like, if you have an HA controller, having all 3 nodes set up properly and allow the user to just only see the DNS name and never really see the IP addresses. It's kind of an interesting, little exercise to play with. So, yeah, so you guys play with this at all? Anyone? It's kind of interesting.
I always kind of wondered how you would do that. So it's good to kind of see you step through it.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I would have to go through the advanced. Yes, I understand that I don't have certificates here. Please let me proceed. Go forward. So, and I'm usually just step testing, so it's nice to see that in practice.
Yeah, what was really interesting, I found Google was really interesting as a cloud provider to test this because as I iterated, I kept killing and rebootstrapping as I kind of worked it out. It has this ephemeral public IP that it keeps giving my same nodes. So it was kind of fun. What made it really nice to play with was that Google kept giving my node, my controller, the same address over and over, which made it easy because I didn't have to DNS update every time. I think what would be really cool would be to wire this actually up. I looked at the Google DNS and to see how I might actually do something where what would be interesting would be is if you bootstrapped with the config, that the controller, once up, might be able to go and register the DNS entry in the underlying cloud provider using, Route 53 on AWS or the GCE, the Google Domain DNS service on GCE. So I think it would be cool to take those next steps and make it kind of more official and kind of awesome. But for now, it's something to play with for sure.
Very cool.
Yeah. All righty. And that are our interesting news from the community for the week, which brings us to our topic of the day. And Tim's here because he has been working very hard on some awesome updates to Libjuju, which is a Python client to speak Juju and control and operate things. And one of the fun bits is that we always kind of say that Juju is great at modeling things, but there are a lot of decisions that really the end user has to make. And so Libjuju gives a really easy to use tool to help users do that, such as scaling things or changing config. And James, I hear that you're using it for some CI pipeline stuff.
Yeah, I've just got a few super simple things going on, but it's just proven to be really solid so far and served the use case that I needed it to serve. And it was really easy for me to just set it up and get going. And I think a lot of people will probably find it useful or more useful than I did.
Cool. So what do you have for us, Tim? Oh, sorry.
Before we start, too, just for on the list, I think Simon over from Elasticist had an email to the Juju list. His subject was orchestration charms, and he was using Libjuju also, specifically, like you were saying, scaling up or scaling down. So I think Elasticist was working on some of their own charms too, and had some questions specifically, as you mentioned before, is someone was saying, hey, I see there's a Juju GUI charm. How do I have something that has credentials for the whole environment? Which is, if folks are interested, check out the orchestration charms thread. People trying to figure out, as I'm a charm, how do I add unit, remove unit? As a charm context, I don't have control over the Juju environment. So if that's interesting to you, definitely comment on the thread because we're trying to figure out what's the right way to be able to, in that charm, a smart charm, right? Mark Shuttleworth said there's a thing called quote stacks out there too. So we're trying to figure out the right way to model that. So I just want to throw that in there as far as some other community news around the same two subjects you had earlier. But Tim.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. So Libjuju. This isn't going to be comprehensive necessarily, but just kind of an intro to Libjuju and what it is, what it does. So first of all, it's a Python client for Juju. And some of you may know that we already had a Python client for Juju called Juju client. And the difference is that Juju client, the old one, it was synchronous and it only implemented a small fraction of the total API that Juju actually exposes. So one of the big differences with the new Python Libjuju is it's fully asynchronous, taking advantage of Async IO in Python 3. and it implements or provides the entire Juju API. And it does that by auto-generating the API facades from the Golang code indirectly. So one benefit is that if it's exposed by Juju, then you will be able to call it and use it from Libjuju. One thing I'll say is if you're interested in using Libjuju and you have no prior exposure to async programming or Async IO in Python 3, that you would do well to read a little bit about that before you tried to use Libjuju, because it would just make things less confusing for you. I linked the repo in IRC, but this is it here. And to install, you can just pip install Juju. There's a little quick start example. I'm going to gloss over that for now and skip over to the documentation, which is also linked here. I'll point out too that it's Python 3.5 or greater required, because the source code uses the async and await keywords that were introduced in Python 3.5. So just be aware of that.
Does that mean it's not compatible with Trusty by default?
It's, well, yeah, because Trusty's 3.4, I believe. So,
yeah, I think you'll have to get an updated Python for that on Trusty, yes.
Mm-hmm.
It's also Juju 2 Plus. I don't know. We've talked about maybe making it backwards compatible with Juju 1 at some point, but whether that will happen or not, I don't know for sure at this point. Yeah, so question at IRC is, how will Libjuju versioning work? Specifically, will it release one-to-one with associated Juju versions? I don't know yet, basically. This is, we just did our first release just before Christmas, and that was built against the most recent release Juju at the time, which I think was 2.0.2. So it implements exactly whatever APIs are present in that version of Juju. What I would like to see happen, and this is kind of open for discussion, is that it's not tied one-to-one with Juju releases, but that you can load whatever version of the API facades that you need. So if you know your controller is running 2.0.2, then in your Python program that's using Libjuju, you would tell it that's the version of the API facades that you need to use, and it would do that, but you could use that same version to load a different, an older or a more recent version of the Juju API facade. So the benefit of that is that we wouldn't have to backport every single bug fix to every older version. So anyways, still early days, and I'm not sure which way we'll go with that front, but I'd definitely be interested to hear people's opinion on that. Moving on, in the docs, I just want to cover a couple like basics of using Libjuju. It does two main things for you, and one of them I already covered, and that's that it exposes the entire Juju API for you to use if you want to. But the other thing it does is it layers on top of that WebSocket API an object-oriented model that looks very similar to the nouns and verbs that you're used to seeing when working with Juju from the command line or the GUI. So you have model objects, application objects, unit objects, action objects, relation objects, things like this. And this first quick start example, I'll just run through it really quick to kind of give everybody a little bit of an understanding of how it works. Just some basic logging configuration here. I don't know if this is big enough for people. That's better. Set up some logging. Get the default Async IO event loop. Again, if you don't know what that means, read up on Async IO first. But Async IO is event-driven, so there's an event loop running underneath everything, and then you have coroutines that are cooperatively scheduled to run by the event loop. So they're light threads. They're concurrently running coroutines, but they're all running in the same thread and just multiplexing between each other. So all this does is say, get me the default event loop and create a task out of my run coroutine, and then just start the event loop and run forever. So our run coroutine is very simple. It creates a new model object, which is imported from juju.model. Then it connects to whatever the current model is. So whatever Juju switch on your machine tells you is the current, whatever you're connected to, it'll just connect to that automatically. And then it deploys an Ubuntu charm, and then it disconnects and it stops the loop. So very simple example, but it shows you kind of the setup and how a basic libjuju program might look. I won't claim that the docs are extensive at this point, but there are a good number of examples in the docs of how to do specific things with libjuju. And there are also a handful of examples in the source tree. So to say a handful, we have demos or examples for running actions, doing charm configuration, working with controllers to create new models, deploying things, relating things together, stuff like that. So definitely have a look through the examples directory if you're looking for specific ways to use it. One thing I will highlight, well, let me just run quickly through this table of contents. So in this example here, we connect to the current model, but you can also connect to a specific named model. You can connect to a certain IP address with user password authentication. You can use macaroon authentication. There are examples for creating and destroying a model, deploying applications, adding units. Maybe I should just click through some of these.
Well, actually, it could be. Oh, sorry. Echo.
Go ahead, Rick.
Sorry, Tim, it's echoing through you there, so I want to mute you there. I think it's good to have the examples. I think if we link to those, that's great. I think what would be interesting would be to kind of talk about some of the things folks are using it for now. So, for instance, James, you mentioned that you were using it in your CI pipeline. Like, which bit are you using it for?
Yeah, so API exposes the Juju Actions, and that's really handy because it allows you to create arbitrary Juju actions that do whatever you want them to do, and then execute those actions remotely in an automated way from wherever you might be running your Libjuju script or your Libjuju application at. I think this just has infinite implementations across the board, but I think CI will be a huge thing. It will allow developers to streamline their workflow and iterate faster just by creating their custom actions. This is just a huge, huge plus for Juju.
Well, that's cool. So you can have an action that says go and update the running code for this this web app I have from Git tree or something, and basically when the Git tests all pass for that source code, can then trigger a CI run, a build, and then an update on the running application to go and fetch the latest from Git and basically update itself to be running it, huh?
Exactly. That's
awesome. So that's very cool. Tim, I know this was in use in some of the Matrix stuff, right? So a lot of the testing code that's going on, it's heavily used there.
So Matrix is to fully set up the model uses Libjuju. So any interactions it does to be able to query for status, query for being able to set up models, all is using Libjuju. So the matrix code behind the scenes is a lot of Libjuju work itself. The one thing that Tim also that was helpful is the examples directory. So when you go to Juju on GitHub, Python tag, Python Libjuju, make sure to check out the examples directory. There's some good stuff in there as far as full status, the AllWatcher. So if folks want to get ramped up on this, do the quick start, check that out, and then check out the examples, which Tim has linked there too. So that's going to be on your front page of the GitHub repository under Juju, Python Libjuju, which has some really good ways. The way I like to get started is copy and paste and see it run for myself, and then start adding in my bits that I see. So I always like to see as quickly as I can it running, and then like, okay, what if I start changing these bits? You know, can I get the actual status that I want out?
That's a really interesting. I think it's worth taking a second to talk about the AllWatcher example there, right? So for folks that aren't aware what that actually is since Juju is very event-driven and it serves a WebSocket for clients to communicate and talk to. And one of the biggest ones has always been the Juju GUI. And if you notice, when you do something outside the GUI, it gets updated and reflected in your running GUI because it has a kind of permanent WebSocket connection to the controller. And what Juju does is it feeds events across that AllWatcher to say, you know, this thing has changed this status, this config has changed, this other thing has been updated, there's been a new application deployed. And it's a continuous stream of events. And so for folks that wanted to really dive into things like automating their systems or whatnot, the AllWatcher is a very interesting tool to use, where rather than polling, you know, every 30 seconds and responding to updates or whatnot, you can create a WebSocket connection in your homegrown application, leveraging Libjuju, to watch the stream that comes across the wire from the controller, and then trigger your own responses to those events and things. So you could see a lot of use cases that folks might be interested in, and rather than setting up a polling mechanism, that kind of AllWatcher is a really useful tool for that.
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about that actually. That AllWatcher example shows kind of how you can use the AllWatcher at a low level, but Libjuju itself takes that and kind of does it for you behind the scenes. So if you're used to writing programs to manipulate a Juju environment or model by having a process that runs Juju status and basically polls Juju status and then does things based on how Juju status changes over time, the difference in Libjuju is that it tells you when something changes. So when you connect to a model with Libjuju, it starts a separate coroutine in the background that's running an AllWatcher for you. And every delta that comes across the wire to the AllWatcher gets synthesized into events that your application can respond to. So there's a section in the docs for that called Reacting to Changes in a Model. And it shows you how you can set up an event handler that will be called whenever something in the model changes. And you can, I'm not going to go through all the details of it. It's explained fairly well here in these docs. But in this example, you have a generic on change. You'll be notified of every change in the model, and then you can inspect the parameters that are coming in to determine what kind of change it is and what you want to do. But you can also get a little more specific in your change handlers. You could define an observer that is looking only for specific types of changes. So tell me when an application changes, or when a unit is removed, or when a machine is added, these types of things. And that brings me to demo time. Anybody? Mm-hmm. I figured I can't end this talk without showing it in action a little bit. So
plus one.
Yeah. So this here on the left pane is the action demo from the examples folder. So it's exactly what is in the source tree right now, and it creates a model, connects to the current model, resets it, so that'll blow away any existing machines or applications, so it's clean. It'll deploy the Git charm straight from the charm store, and then for every unit of that app that there is, and there's only going to be one because we're only deploying one, it'll run an action on that unit. And so it's calling this run action, which will, you can see here, call unit.runAction and tell it the name of the action to run and whatever parameters it needs. In this case, it's the name of a repo. And then it'll wait for that action to complete, and then it will just log the results of that action. And then we'll be here at this point. It'll disconnect and stop the event loop. So here I have a clean, I've just Juju add model demo. So as you can see, Juju status is running up here. I have a clean model with nothing in it. And I'll just run action.py. And we get some debug output showing WebSocket connections being made to that model. We see fetching charm from the charm store, deploying the get charm. You can see the action has already been queued up asynchronously. And so what's happening now is Juju API has been told that we want to run an action on that unit, but the unit's not ready yet, so it's waiting.
That's cool. So you don't even have a machine or anything, and you're triggering up and queuing up activities for once it does come about.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So if we wait here, I mean, it shouldn't take too long, but as soon as that get unit is available, the action will be run, our results will come back, and it'll log those and then shut down. Bigger font, please. Sorry.
We'll have to tell Adam he needs to run this on his TV at home. Well, hook it up to the big screen. It's the only true way to watch the Juju show. What are you talking about? HD or bust.
Let's see. Any other? I'm reading IRC, looking for any other questions while we're waiting for the demo.
No, but I have a question for you on. So this is very specific to the controller APIs. Can you do anything with scripting and manipulating things like clouds and credentials locally, or is that not in the scope of what we've got so far?
That is not in the scope right now. There are stubs for those things in the source tree. So let me pause and say that our demo just ended. So our action, and you see this model changed, action change, and action UUID. That's coming from that AllWatcher in the background that's looking for model changes. So every time you see one of these model change debug outputs, that's Libjuju getting an asynchronous delta from the API server, and then it dispatches it out to anything that's watching for those changes. But in this case, our action finishes, we get the results back, we log the results, we say, okay, I created a new repo and here's the directory it's at, and then it just shuts down. So anyway, clouds and credentials. Yeah, so there's some things that can be done exclusively over the API, and then there's some things that can't, like bootstrapping. So most of the work that's been done so far is with stuff that can happen over the API. We do have a little bit of code in there, like if you say connect to the current model, then it's sniffing out. It's a combination of looking at Juju YAML files or in Juju CLI commands to figure out what is the current model so it can connect to it. Mm-hmm. There's more work to be done there for sure. Most of what's implemented now is stuff that you can use once you've connected to a controller or a model.
Okay, cool. Well, that's good and helpful to know kind of what's baked in and what things folks can help participate and help add to this lovely open source community project in Juju land.
Yeah, one more announcement. We might be running out of time on this topic, but if you're going to Config Management Camp, I will be giving another talk on Libjuju there, and I'll be doing a somewhat more interesting demo of something that we've built with Libjuju that's a little more interesting than just running an action. So if you're curious, stay tuned for that.
Cool. And along those lines, I would very much encourage anyone who tries out using Libjuju to solve a problem for themselves to hit up the Juju mailing list and share with us kind of what you've done. You know, if at all possible, it's always great to show code and more examples. And kind of what I love is this is very open-ended. Like there's a, you know, folks start saying certain things and then it triggers, ooh, I could do this and I hadn't thought about doing that before. And it kind of, you know, tickles your brain to think in different ways. And so I think that the more folks we have kind of demonstrating useful bits, the more others will get involved and to kind of, you know, get their own ideas and to help participate. You could definitely see this growing. Well, cool. Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate the demo and the walkthrough, and we'll have links to the libraries and the documentation and everything in the show notes. We'll also, you know, just for the record, have a follow-up email to the list, you know, about using Libjuju. I'll bribe Tim into writing something up and getting it to the list after the show. And since we're both being config management camp, I have access to good bribes. It will be in person. I can purchase Juju beverages and slick the rails that way. Alrighty, that's so. I mean, guess what we've got. And you guys have any comments, feedback? No, everyone's just blown away. It's like, BD looks like he is contemplating lots more things to script up now. All right.
Well, Chef and Chef and Puppet, if you look at like Datadog or I don't know if you guys have spent much time with that, but recently I demoed the Datadog monitoring platform and their infrastructure platform pretty heavily. And one thing I noticed when, you know, I saw some of their demos is they had these Chef reporting agents that would report all of the different like activity and different events that were going on that were like, you know, cookbooks that were being ran, or when something would get updated, or this or that. The Chef, whatever was exporting that Chef data back to Datadog really allowed them to integrate it into their platform. So it was like, you know, here's your infrastructure, and then, you know, here right next to it in the same dashboard or whatever is what's going on with Chef with this bit of infrastructure. So, I mean, I just instantly, you know, the AllWatcher example just kind of gives me that inclination that this is kind of what could facilitate that kind of use case for Juju as well.
It'd be a really interesting kind of, I don't know about a subordinate situation, but basically, yeah, that if you're doing true full CI/CD, right, continuous deployment, you're going to be deploying frequently. So, and like in the case of your example there, James, you know, with the action that triggers the code update. But not only that, you need to track those events on when it was updated so that you can make intelligent decisions on, you know, if your error rate in your application running in production starts to go up right after you performed an application update, roll back, abort, you know. And so you could see stuff like this kind of helping to track what happened in the infrastructure and the operation side, and then pairing that up with the information coming into Datadog and other tracker, you know, metrics collection tools and things like that to help pair that information up and make some intelligent decisions on what was going on. Cool. Well, with that, I think we'll wrap up for today. And I appreciate everyone's time, and Tim for showing us some awesome stuff, and look forward to seeing some more in Config Management Camp here in a couple of weeks. So everyone, thank you very much. Have a good day. See you guys in 2 weeks. Same bat time, same bat channel. We'll have another exciting episode of the Juju Show.